Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis, and today I have another deck profile for you, this time on Lost Zone box with the new Pikachu EX from Surging Sparks. We've had a couple regionals pass by now with this Pikachu EX legal, and it has become not just the most popular way to play Lost Box, but possibly debatably the only way to play Lost Box. I think it's pretty rare to see people playing the deck without Pikachu EX now, maybe the occasional Radiant Charizard build, but this is far and above the most popular way to play the deck now. Pikachu EX just gives you a very strong option for one-shotting most Pokemon in the format, especially Regidrago V-Star, and then, of course it can survive a hit usually, barring any abilities like Curse Blast from Dusknoir and Dusclops, or anything else that your opponent might use, like Canceling Clone, to get around the Resolute Heart ability. Pikachu EX just adds a very, very powerful option that Lost Box did not necessarily have before. There are definitely some Pokemon that it struggles to knock out in one hit without this Pikachu, and then there's some things that it makes it a lot easier to knock out, like Charizard EX. You can set up damage with Sableye on the Charizard and then finish it off with Topaz Bolt later, or the other way around. Which is a very, very powerful new option. At first, I was in the camp of people who thought that deck would probably be too inconsistent with all the different energy types. This list plays 5 different energy types now instead of the 3 that Lost Zone Box played before. But after testing it, it actually just felt fine. It has not felt like a problem at all to have that many moving energy types around, especially because you only play a couple of Metal and Grass Energy, and they are really only used for Pikachu. So in games where, for whatever reason, you don't have access to them, you are pretty content to just play a normal Lost Zone Box game and not use the Pikachu EX in those games if you don't have to. So without further ado, let's get into the Pokemon. Start with the 4 Comfey. 1 Sableye, 1 Cramorant. These are pretty much quintessential in Lost Box. Some people have cut the Sableye to fit in the Pikachu EX, but I don't think that is worth it. I think that at least 1 Sableye, 1 Psychic Energy is definitely worth it to have the option. Lost Mine is just such a powerful attack, and it honestly combos pretty well with Pikachu. Like I said, using it to set up the extra little bit of damage for when you need to knock out things with more than 300 HP. And Sableye just being really good against all of the, low HP Pokemon that are still very popular in the format. Also picking off your opponent's Manaphy before Radiant Greninja. Just a very, very powerful tool. I don't think that, the 1 Sableye, 1 Psychic Energy is not so much deck space that you can't afford to play it, even with the Pikachu EX in the deck. The Comfey, obviously we're maxing that out. The Cramorant, just a very, I think, maybe not completely essential attacker in Lost Box, but I think that games where you have sort of slower starts, you can get punished really hard for not having access to the Cramorant, that nice early game attacker. We are playing the Manaphy for Kyurem and opposing Radiant Greninjas. Also can be good against Hydreigon EX, but of course mostly here give us a more playable Regidrago matchup, forcing them to have Canceling Clone to get through it. And then there are so many Radiant Greninja decks at the moment, so we don't want to let them take that little bit of an advantage against us. I think that there's an argument not to play Manaphy if it were just the Radiant Greninja decks, because we can definitely win still in games where our opponent uses Moonlight Shuriken to take a couple of prizes. That's not necessarily game losing for us, but with Kyurem in the format, the Manaphy pretty essential in that matchup, even if they can Canceling Clone through it. It just makes things a lot harder for them. Makes things a lot safer for us, and it is still a nice luxury to have against other Radiant Greninja decks. Speaking of Radiant Greninja, we have our Radiant Greninja. Pretty staple in Lost Box if we're playing Mirage Gate. Moonlight Shuriken, just a powerful attack. We can use it as early as turn 1 if we draw well enough, which is super, super punishing for a lot of matchups. Using Moonlight Shuriken to take multiple prize cards is a key strategy in part of our prize map in so many matchups. Even just the Moonlight Shuriken on 2 Pokemon with 210 HP or less, and then Lost Mine on both of them the next 2 turns. That's a 3 turn for 4 prize cards, so allows you to take a bit of an advantage there as well. And then, of course, concealed cards just being a very key consistency option in these Lost Box decks when we're playing so many energy. It's actually also pretty important at times if we get too many of the same energy in our hand to concealed cards away specific energies. That way we can shuffle them back in with Super Rod, search them out with Mirage Gate, because of course we can't accelerate them with Mirage Gate if they are stuck in our hand, and we do not have any more of that type of energy in deck. Then we have the Pikachu EX that I talked about earlier. Since I already touched on sort of why this card is now good in Lost Box, I won't over-explain it. But Topaz Bolt, just very, very powerful. Knocks out a lot of things that we couldn't necessarily knock out in one hit before. And Resolute Heart sort of making Pikachu EX feel a lot less like a two-prize Pokemon. You know, it typically takes 2 hits for our opponent to knock it out, which makes it a lot more resilient. And of course, we're still playing the Iron Hands, especially since we do have Lightning Energy in the deck for Pikachu. Iron Hands, just a kind of a no-brainer. If you can set up Iron Hands in a deck, it's usually correct to play one to be able to do so. It just, if you very much is such a powerful attack that lets you win games that you otherwise wouldn't by taking that 2-prize turn on Pokemon that normally only give up 1. Or even in combination with Sableye and Greninja, we can use Ampy very much to take like 3-prize cards on certain Pokemon, like Fezandipiti. And I was going to say, even Pokemon without setting up damage on them preemptively, you know, like Lumineon and Squawkabilly, which we can take 3-prize cards on. Then we have Bloodmoon Ursaluna. Honestly, just very important as like for the amount of damage that it does. It's like a very key way to take our last couple of prize cards. It's also pretty bulky, so it's going to be annoying for our opponent to knock out. Comboing this with our one of Roxanne in order to try to survive a hit and then attack with it again is an easy way to take a big like 4-2 prize comeback. Or even 4-1 prize comeback. Bloodmoon, just a very energy efficient, strong attacker in the late game. Very important in things like the Raging Bolt matchup. And really any matchup that plays a lot of like big base Pokemon like Miraidon or Roaring Moon EX. Next we have Fezandipiti EX. So this isn't something that's staple on all Lost Box lists, but I do like having the Cruel Arrow as a little bit of an extra, slightly higher damage snipe option, but Fezandipiti mostly in here for flip the script. Just turning all your Nest Balls into a potential draw 3, especially in the late game. If you really, really need to, you know, keep digging for the piece that you need to get your last attack off, especially after something like an Iono, Fezandipiti can just be a very, very important card. I think that, obviously, you don't want to have to bench Fezandipiti early game, but when you do have to bench Fezandipiti, it is usually your only chance to survive those games. Next we have our supporters, of course, the 4 Colts Experiment to help us build cards in the Lost Zone and add key resources to our hand. One of Roxanne, just another sort of a 5th draw supporter, and it also offers us that essential disruption option, especially in combination with things like Lost Mine or Bloodmoon knocking on Fezandipiti. It just gives us a way to come back in situations where we otherwise wouldn't be able to. And then 1 Boss's Orders, just so that we have a way to bring up our opponent's Pokemon. You know, as a Lost Box deck, we pretty often do go ahead on prize cards if we have a strong enough start. So in those games, it can be really important to have Boss. We can't exactly substitute for Counter Catcher. So just having the 1 to make sure that we can gust when we need to is very important. Next, we have the items. We're maxing out on our Super Rod count for consistency. Shovel, we play so many Pokemon, so many energy. We're always sending energy to discard pile with concealed cards and retreats and Moonlight Shurikens, or just getting knocked out. Topaz Bolt also discards all of your energy. We go through so many Pokemon. You know, some games we want to use Sableye 2 or 3 times, but we only play the 1 of, so we need to keep recycling it. 4 Super, and of course we're gonna have to Lost Zone some at times. So 4 Super Rod, definitely staple. 4 Nest Ball, another just max out our consistency. We only play basic Pokemon, and none of them need to be searched out with Ultra Ball, the way that like a Lumineon V would be. So maximum kind of Nest Ball for consistency, very, very important. Make sure that we get the right Pokemon at the right times. 3 Buddy-Buddy Poffin. We'll only play 3 because it only really searches Comfey. I suppose it searches Manaphy as well. But primarily just to get a couple of Comfeys. We only really want to see this on turn 1. After the first couple of turns, it loses a lot of value. We're trying to just send them to the Lost Zone. So just playing the 3, well, you know, the 3 still giving us a nice, strong early game consistency. 4 Switch Cart and 3 Switch. So 7 switching cards to move our Comfeys around and keep using those flower selectings, switching to our attackers. Of course, playing more Switch Cart than Switch, just because we only play base Pokemon, so we might as well get that little bit of extra healing. 2 Lost Vacuum. Just mostly to help us get more cards on the Lost Zone, but of course we can also use it in combination with Roxanne, while getting rid of something like a PokéStop or an Artisan. Key stadiums that are going to help our opponent find what they need after the Roxanne. We can just get them out of play. Also getting rid of things like Bravery Charm is very important for picking specific matchups with Pokemon, like hitting into a Raging Bolt with Bloodmoon. One Night Stretcher. I would like to play a second one of these, but I think that playing more energy is just a little bit more important with Pikachu EX and forcing us to play so many different types of energy. So I'm only playing the one Night Stretcher. It's just a sort of an addition to Super Odd, but of course, the card going into hand does offer some advantages, like concealed cards, or, getting the Pokemon immediately without having to have a Nest Ball to search it out. But Super Odd is definitely so much better. We need to play 4 of them in this deck, so we're just playing the one copy of Night Stretcher, but we would definitely play more if we had the space. One copy of Hisuian Heavy Wall. We only play basic Pokemon, and we play a one-of count of so many of them. We want to make sure that we don't have the Pokemon that we need to win that specific game prized in those specific games. So just having that option to access them. And then one of Pal Pad. We only have 4 Colress, 1 Roxanne, 1 Boss, so want to make sure that we can reuse them if we need to, especially the Boss. We can also use Pal Pad to shuffle a couple Colress back in early to play around Kyurem and Regidrago. Its ability reducing its attack cost if we do have Colress in the discard pile. It's most important to use Pal Pad right before you think you're going to get Iono. So if you're going down to maybe 1 prize and your opponent's definitely going to want Iono you next turn, sometimes it can be best to save the Pal Pad for then, because you Pal Pad at the end of your turn, shovel the Colresses back in, and then you know that if your opponent Ionos you have 2 potential outs to Colress to draw into off of the Iono. One of Prime Catcher, just the optimal ace spec in Lost Box. We really want to be using Colress every single turn almost, except for the 1 or 2 turns that we can use Roxanne or Boss. So having that item that is a guaranteed gust is very, very important. Also, the extra switching card can also be nice for just getting more flower selectings. If we open the Prime Catcher in our early game, turn 1 or 2, that's usually going to be very key in getting us the attack that we want off with Mirage Gate early on. Next we have Stadiums, Tools, and Energy, starting with 3 PokéStop. There's another card. If you really have the space, you can play 4, but 3 is plenty. You'll pretty much always find them when you need to. Obviously you're not always going to have PokéStop in play, but you don't always need to. You just want to find 1 early game pretty consistently to Lost Vacuum away, because that's the fastest way to build up your Lost Zone. And, just find them occasionally throughout the game to keep drawing more cards. One tip with PokéStop is usually you want to use it before using Colress or flower selecting. Just that way you get the extra information about what you discarded and what's added to your hand before you make the decisions with flower selecting and Colress. Since the PokéStop is, what you get off of that is random, whereas you have choice when it comes to flower selecting and Colress, you want to, have the random occurrence happen before you commit your choices. This isn't always correct to PokéStop first, but I would say generally, as a rule of thumb, you should be, if you're not sure what the proper sequence is there, that you should be leaning towards using PokéStop first usually. 1 Rescue Board. This is our only tool in the deck. Just a nice way to retreat our Comfey, especially to have just a free switch basically every single turn. After we get knocked out or maybe our opponent plays an Iono. Even if our opponent doesn't play an Iono, we're getting knocked out pretty much every turn since our Pokemon have relatively low HP. So always having that Comfey that we can bring active, use flower selecting, and then retreat it without needing to have any switches in our hand prior. Then we have the energy count: 3 Water Energy, 2 Lightning Energy, 2 Metal, 2 Grass, and 1 Psychic. So we're playing that 1 Psychic Energy just to make sure that we have the option of using Sableye, 2 Grass, and 2 Metal, just in case we prize 1. We want to make sure that we can always use Pikachu EX's attack when we need to. 2 Lightning Energy for the same reason, except, a little bit more important. I'd say if you were going to add a third, obviously it would be the Lightning Energy, since you can also use it for Iron Hands. And then 3 Water Energy, since we need 2 water to use Moonlight Shuriken, and we absolutely want to be able to use Moonlight Shuriken as consistently as possible. We also have to attach from hand for a water to use Moonlight Shuriken usually, because we go Mirage Gate for water and another energy, and then attach water from hand. Whereas with the Metal, Lightning, and Grass for Pikachu, we can really attach any one of the 3 to Pikachu and the Mirage Gate for the other 2. Lastly, we have the matchups. So let's go over our positive matchups first. We have Raging Bolt. You just trade very efficiently with them. You're almost always going to get the first 2 prize cards. They'll get the first one. maybe on a Comfey or something like that, and then you can take the prize lead with Bloodmoon. Now with Pikachu EX, you can even, buy a turn where you just swing at them for a knockout with Pikachu EX. Basically, before you didn't have a way to one-shot them using a one-prize Pokemon, but now, I mean, you still technically don't, but Pikachu EX is never going to die in one hit against Raging Bolt, so you kind of have a way to always throw the prize trade into your favor. Of course, if they meant something like Squawkabilly and Slitherwing, then you can also take a 3-prize turn on Squawkabilly with Iron Hands at the end of the game, pick off the Slitherwing a bit earlier. And you can also use the Moonlight Shuriken 90-90 into Lost Mine to take 4 prize cards if they bench something like Fezandipiti and Squawkabilly. That way you take 4 prize cards in 3 turns, like I was talking about earlier. Next we have Lugia V-Star. It's Lightning Weakness, really kicking it here. Their best option previously was to use something like Bloodmoon to try to tank a hit against you. Now that's not an option, either with Pikachu EX in the fold. So we can, take a 3-prize turn with Iron Hands almost always into them. They're very reliant on Lumineon and, of course, Lugia itself. So we have so many ways to take extra prize cards against them, even with the Legacy Energy to try to throw us off. It's certainly not an unwinnable matchup for them. They can just sort of get a hands going really early, and if we can't respond, that can be a problem. But typically, you can just respond to it with like a Bloodmoon or a Pikachu EX, and eventually take the lead despite the Legacy Energy. I'd say that Lugia definitely has a chance, but it's very favorable for Lost Box. Terapagos, mostly the Pidgeot build, this is referring to. Another positive matchup. They just don't have a good way to trade with us. I think their best chance is to use multiple Dusknoirs on the same turn to take a few prize cards, force you to take a few prize cards. I know you to a low hand size before you've really thinned your deck out significantly. That gives you the highest chance of bricking. Of course, if they use multiple Dusknoir on the same turn before using Iono, that also means they're picking off multiple of your support Pokemon, which are what are going to help you draw out of an Iono. So that is their best chance to put things into their favor. But just generally speaking, you're almost always going to have the prize lead in this matchup. You're going to get the first attack. Some of us don't even play Manaphy to play around Moonlight Shuriken, so you can just Moonlight Shuriken a couple Hoot-Hoots really early on. They have to get double Bouffalant down to play around that, which is very, very tough for them. You can also just Sableye the Bouffalant, so it's not like they can keep those in play to keep your damage reduced. You just have so many options. They also struggle to one-shot a Bloodmoon Ursaluna EX, which gives you another out. If they bench 2 Duskull, you can pick them both off with Lost Mine. There are just so many ways for you to get ahead in the prize trade in this matchup, and they're so reliant on little Pokemon to set up, and you can just keep picking them off, making their draws a lot worse. That it's hard for them to make you miss attacks consistently. We have Goldango. So Goldango lists often not playing Manaphy either, so we can usually get the first 2 prize cards with a Moonlight Shuriken on them. And of course we can use Pikachu EX to one-shot Goldango, and it can't be one-shot back unless they play something like a Canceling Clone. And even then they're only trading 2 for 2, so another matchup where we're pretty much always just going to have the favorable prize exchange. So to play Palkia, we can even go ahead and take the Ampy Very Much knockout for 3 on a Palkia V potentially, or set it up with a Lost Mine and then knock out the Palkia V-Star with Iron Hands. So that's another way to just sort of take some prizes and get ahead. If they bench Togepi, I believe it only has 50 HP, so you can Lost Mine a Gimmighoul and a Togepi. I'd say if they get really lucky and just keep flipping heads on Togekiss attacks, then they might have a chance, but just generally speaking, it's a very good matchup for you. Then we have Iron Thorns, so we're just not that affected by Iron Thorns. We can one-shot them with Pikachu if we need to. They don't really slow us down much. So of course, they don't let us use Bloodmoon or Fez, but we don't necessarily need those to get going. Pretty easy to just, get set up and start taking attacks. Slowing down concealed cards can definitely make things a little bit trickier, but I'd say that generally speaking, because they're just taking, 1 prize a turn and they're not getting a turn 1 attack or anything, it's pretty easy to stay ahead in this matchup. Or, maybe they take an early lead and you're able to just take 3 knockouts in a row with Pikachu EX, or, a knockout with a couple Sableye, a Cramorant into a Sableye, and then 2 knockouts with Pikachu EX. If they get really lucky on pennies and Ionos, then they can beat you sometimes, but I generally say that you're relatively able to draw and find what you need under the initialization lock still. Next we have Ceruledge. They just don't have a great way to keep up with the prize trade against you. Of course, again, this is a matchup where you can one-shot the Ceruledge, and they don't really have a way to one-shot the Pikachu back. They typically are very reliant on support Pokemon, like Squawkabilly and Fezandipiti, so you can target those down to take extra prize cards. And other than Briar, they don't really have a way to take a 2-prize turn themselves. They have Palkia V-Star and Water Energy to use Moonlight Shuriken sometimes, but you can prevent that with Manaphy. And typically they're not going to play something like Canceling Clone, so as long as you get Manaphy down, you can prevent that pretty easily. The only annoying thing can be that you can't one-shot a Ceruledge with a Bloodmoon, but you can one-shot it with Pikachu, and you can also just set up all of their Ceruledge to be in range of Bloodmoon knockouts using Sableye. Then we have Roaring Moon EX, just another matchup where, we just trade super favorably. They're very reliant on 2-prize Pokemon, very reliant on Squawkabilly. As long as we can, get set up and get our Mirage Gates rolling, we should always have ways to take 2-prize knockouts on them turn after turn to stay ahead in the race. Then we have our even matchups. We have Miraidon for starters. So Miraidon can be tough just because they can get turn 1 Ampy very much, and if we don't find a response, then they're going to take a huge lead against us. But I'd say that generally, your goal is to use turn 2 Pikachu EX to respond to the Iron Hands, or even just an early, if you can get a turn 2 Blood Moon attack, then, as long as you can keep up with the prize race, usually you can get ahead, but if they draw well enough, they can just set up multiple Iron Hands and then just Ampy very much 3 turns in a row, especially if they get to go second. So definitely pretty even. I'd say that whoever hits the first attack just really has a massive, massive advantage here. Then we have Charizard. So this is a matchup where, if they set up perfectly, it can be really tough, especially if you don't draw super well off their Ionos, but you can, you're usually going to get the first prize card because they are a slower deck. You'll usually get at least a Spit Innocently off. They're pretty prone to Moonlight Shuriken. All of list, again, don't play Manaphy. So if they don't, then you can just go for a Moonlight Shuriken and take 2 prize cards right away. If you go first, you can even get a turn 2 Lost Mine to stop Pidgeot from coming out, which can usually be your best play. Just preventing the Pidgeot gives them so many less options. You can use Sableye to set up to take a knockout on one Pokemon and set up a Charizard for Topaz Bolt. You can also just, if you knock out the Pidgeot with Blood Moon or Ampy very much after softening it with Lost Mine, or maybe you just knock it out with Arm Press. On the same turn that you're Roxanne, you might be able to stop them from Ionoing you on a key turn and keep a big hand size going to your turn. That way you can close up the game. There's just a lot of ways that you can, steal the matchup from them. But, it definitely still close just because they play so many Ionos. Usually at least 2 and maybe a Pal Pad, possibly even a Roxanne in some lists. So they just have a lot of options to disrupt you, and it can be very difficult to keep up at times. Then we have Gardevoir EX. This is a matchup where, generally, Lost Box would be really favored. Again, most Gardevoir lists don't play Manaphy. Another deck that just is a little bit weaker into you because of that. You can get an early game Moonlight Shuriken off on them. However, Gardevoir lists typically play Klefki and Fluttermane, and both of these Pokemon can be, really disruptive for you. I think that there's a lot of potential to come back against Gardevoir. Looking at the NAIC finals from last year, you can sort of see how even under that Klefki Fluttermane lock, Lost Box can still pull a lot of plays off, still has a lot of options, still has a lot of ways to get cards in the Lost Zone, especially if you just keep finding Colress Experiments, or find your Prime Catcher, or, Boss and then use some Flower Selectings. And because of the lack of Manaphy, even if you're under Klefki and Fluttermane lock, you can still use Radiant Greninja to take some 2 prize card turns, or you can use the Mirage Gates to get your Iron Hand set up. So there's a lot of ways for you to, come back in the matchup, especially in combination with a Roxanne. If you, Moonlight Shuriken, double Kirlia, and use Roxanne. Of course, their Gardevoir struggles to attack without putting any damage on itself, and if it puts any damage on itself, then it's in one-shot range for Pikachu EX. So it's definitely close because sometimes you just get shut down by that ability lock, but you have lots of ways to get around the ability lock as well. Next, we have Palkia V-Star. This is mostly referring to the Dusknoir build, but of course, I'd say that the Noctowl build, which is becoming increasingly popular, is a much better matchup. They just don't have as many ways to disrupt you. Of course, they still have Iono, but they don't have those Dusknoirs to knock out multiple of your support Pokemon on the same turn as using Iono. This matchup's a little bit worse than Terapagos matchup, in my opinion. Specifically, the Palkia Dusknoir build is worse than Terapagos matchup, just because they have a bit bulkier of attacking options. Of course, you can do something like Arm Press into Palkia, but they also have Moonlight Shuriken. So they're just you have a few less options for knocking out the Palkia than you do a Terapagos, and they one-shot your Pokemon a lot easier. It's a lot easier for them to one-shot Iron Hands, a lot easier for them to one-shot a Bloodmoon Ursaluna. And that Moonlight Shuriken usually is going to be able to come down early game, especially with the Dusknoir on Manaphy, and take a couple of extra prize cards against you. So they have a lot of ways to sort of wipe you off the board really early. Honestly, a lot of the time they can even, especially if they go first, get like a turn 2, get a Dusknoir off and a Moonlight Shuriken, and you can just sort of have bad draws from that. That's immediately your opponent is taking 3 prize cards and knocking out probably 3 of your Comfeys, or Greninja and double Comfey, or Manaphy double Comfey. So you just don't have that many ways to keep drawing cards at that point, and you need to keep up. You need to start taking prize cards immediately to keep up with that level of pressure. Especially if they can go attach to Greninja and then Star Portal 3 more energy on it, leave it with 4 energy, and then Moonlight Shuriken, and then they can Moonlight Shuriken again on the following turn if you don't get Manaphy back down, so that can be very scary as well. Lastly, we have Dragapult. This is a matchup where, Phantom Dive can be really annoying. They can set up for multiple prize turns against you, but you can also pick off a lot of their Pokemon really early with Moonlight Shuriken, keep them from setting up. It really just depends on how well the Dragapult player sets up, in my opinion. I think if they get set up really quickly, they set up multiple Dragapults, you're going to have a tough time. But if you can, maybe make it so they only get one Dragapult out early game, and then you knock it out with Pikachu, you can make them miss a few attacks throughout the game, then you have the prize trade on your side at that point. Lastly, our unfavorable matchups: Regidrago, Snorlax. So Regidrago, of course they have the Kyurem. That is primarily why the matchup is so bad. They have Kyurem and Canceling Clone and Prime Catcher, so they can just take multi-prize turns against you. I think that with Roxanne and Pikachu EX, you can definitely go for the Pikachu EX, knock out the Drago, and Roxanne them on the same turn, or just leave them with no attackers. And now you have a good way to actually trade with the Regidrago, but of course them just attacking with the Kyurem in and of itself is still just a massive threat. Them using Iono plus Kyurem multiple times is typically going to be very tough to overcome. It's hard for you to even set up a Pikachu EX attack against them at that point. And it's hard for you to manage your board in a way that Kyurem isn't taking multiple prize cards on you. They can also, use a Legacy Star to reuse Canceling Clones. They can go through Manaphy twice, even if you manage to keep it down. And like Dragapult, they can set up multiple prize turns against you with Phantom Dive as well. They don't necessarily only need to use Kyurem. Phantom Dive is still a great attack against you, and so is Goodra V-Star's Rolling Iron attack, making it very, very difficult to knock out the Regidrago V-Star. So then you're having to use Prime Catcher or Boss to get around it at that point. And then Snorlax, you just play so many items. They're Aries and Misfortune Sisters. As long as they find the right stuff, they're usually going to be able to run you out of switching cards. I think your best bet is to just try to set up an Iron Hands and then use all of your switch cards to go for Iron Hands attacks. You don't really want to use your switch cards to bring Cramorant up, because I think you're just going to run out of switching cards so much faster without actually taking knockouts. You just want to set up an Iron Hands and just spam Arm Press over and over again. Of course, if they send Mimikyu up, then of course you go into the Cramorant and just knock that out quick. But generally, their better plan is to go with Snorlax's, and your best answer is just to try to Arm Press over and over again and hope that you draw into enough switching cards to take 6 prizes with Arm Press before they run all of your switching cards out with Aerie and Misfortune Sisters. But still a tough matchup. They play a lot of Misfortune Sisters. You can prize some. You might have to Lost Zone some. I think you have a pretty good shot if you play it very carefully, but it's, you have to be very precise, and depending on, their timing on Aerie and Zero Sick and Misfortune Sisters, if they play Iono, that can be annoying for you as well. There's just so many things that make it really tough for you. So that's everything. I know that Lost Box has not super popped off this format yet. I think it's definitely gotten a lot more hype since Pikachu EX released, but it didn't get top 8 at Sacramento. It didn't get top 8 at Stuttgart this past weekend. But my student, Camille Budzinski, actually did get top 8 at Sacramento in seniors with the deck. A list that was just one card off. He played a second Night Stretcher over one of the Metal Energy. But I do think that playing the double Metal is correct in hindsight. And I do think the deck is still incredibly strong. I mean, the matchup spread speaks for itself. I think that obviously Regidrago is a pretty bad matchup. And it's not a bad matchup that you want to take. But it's definitely very winnable. I don't think that either the Dragos or Snorlax matchups are unwinnable. I think that if you outplay your opponent, both matchups are fairly solid. If there's like a skill gap, but it still feels rough, even if you only take a couple of bad matchups to take a bad matchup for Regidrago, of course, especially right now. I think that Lost Box could be really well poised for Toronto if you do expect a drop into Drago. I don't necessarily expect Regidrago to fall off that much, but it did have a complete, absentee weekend from Stuttgart Regionals. Did not have any Regidragos in top 8, so maybe you will see a bit of a decline. That being said, thank you for watching. I hope that this is helpful for your starting point for Lost Box, helps you navigate some of these trickier matchups. I will be back with another video very soon. If you want to check out any of my other content or socials, my link tree is in the description below. Thank you for watching.